Hello again guys, GS30 here with DOA Firearms, and today I'll be working on something exciting. I'll be replacing the stock trigger in the Smith & Wesson SD40VE with the Apex Tactical Action Enhancement Trigger Kit. This will be exciting, stay tuned. So for this job we need a trigger pull gauge, a bench block, a hammer, a toothbrush, 1/8 punch, 1/16 punch, and a microtip flathead screwdriver. We also need the Apex Tactical Action Enhancement Trigger Kit on the SD9VE or SD40VE. So the first thing I'll do is go ahead and test the trigger pull on this SD40VE and then compare it with what the trigger pull is after we install the Apex Tactical Action Enhancement Trigger Kit system. So at this point I'll go ahead and I'll check the trigger pull on this SD40VE with the factory trigger still installed. There's nothing in the chamber, no magazine inside. This firearm is clear. £3 11 ounces. £3 13 ounces. £4 7 ounces. So on average, this trigger pull for the SD40VE is about 4 pounds. So let's just leave it at that. We'll compare it later with the Apex Action Enhancement Trigger Kit system, okay? So now I'll go ahead and I'll unbox the contents of this Apex Tactical Action Enhancement Trigger Kit. So this is the trigger. It looks a lot like the Glock trigger. This here is the striker spring, striker block spring, and this is the trigger return spring. I'll begin to disassemble the firearm just so I could start the installation of the different parts and pieces. So I'll go ahead and remove the guide rod and the recoil spring. Remove the barrel. I'll set the frame aside just so I could work with the slide first. So to remove the back plate, I need to pull on a little piece of plastic right here. So I'll pull the plastic towards me. And I'll just slightly push up on the black back plate and it just comes all the way off. So I'm going to remove the striker. I'll just punch out this hinge pin just so I could remove the striker block. And for that we use the 1/8 punch. I can feel tension on the punch given that the extractor is becoming loose. Alright, so I'll take my time. I want to keep my hand on the striker block here. It is spring tension, so I don't want it to fly away, so I'm going to keep my finger on it. Just slightly release this. You could remove this spring if you want, but you could leave it there, no need to really remove it. I'll slowly release the striker block. So now I go ahead and I'll just remove the striker block. And this is a striker block spring. I'll do a quick comparison to see what the factory spring looks like versus the Apex spring. So if you look at it, you can see that the factory spring looks like it's a lot more stiffer, while the Apex one looks a lot more softer. Put on the Apex spring. I'll put the factory spring in a bag. Now let's go ahead and let's real quickly install this right away, given that it's on it. So I'll put it back in here. This spring is a little bit lighter, so it gives a little bit of problem, but nothing too much we can't handle. There we go. So I'll go ahead and I'll just reinstall the extractor here. To do that, we need to keep the striker block down just so we could press down on the extractor. And we'll just start knocking in this pin right here. We'll try not to damage our slide. Okay, so we'll now go ahead and just knock it in properly. And for that you could use a 1/8 punch just so that it won't go further than it should go. we just check on the inside, and that is perfect. So there you have it. We just went ahead and we installed the striker block spring. We'll now install the striker spring. For that, we need to pull down on this spring, remove these little pieces of plastics, and then we'll remove the striker spring. Striker spring in the left hand, apex spring on the right. So we'll just check the tension on these. They're slightly similar, but you could definitely tell that the factory spring is a lot stiffer. Factory spring in the left hand, I'll put it in the bag. And I'll just put the apex spring on here. Give it some tension. Now I'll reinstall these pieces of plastic right here. Okay, there you have it. So now we'll go ahead and we'll reinstall the striker. So we'll use our microtip flathead screwdriver just to pull on this piece of plastic so we could go ahead and reinstall our back plate. Okay, so our back plate is installed. The firing pin is not coming forward. If we press down on the striker block, then we should see the firing pin. There we go. We're seeing the firing pin. That's just a quick quality control check really. And if also we move this extractor, we should see it moves. It is moving. If you look here, you can see it slightly moves, but it looks like it's fine, not going forward. Pressing down, firing pin does go forward. So we're pretty much finished with the slide. So we'll reinstall the barrel on the glide rod. So we're now finished with the slide. We'll set it aside and we'll start working on the frame. So now we'll go ahead and we'll remove the trigger so we can replace the trigger and the trigger return spring. The best way to do that is to set the firearm down on the left side. So we'll set it down like this. We'll use this side of the block. And we'll use our 1/8 punch. The reason why we set the firearm down on the left side is because this pin has a little groove and it's harder to knock it from that left side than knock it from the right side. I'll show you once it comes out. So I'll put this hinge pin down and I'll slowly remove my punch. I'll go ahead and I'll remove this and set it to the side. Okay, and now I'll remove my trigger. So this is what our factory trigger looks like. I need to punch out this little metal from the trigger. And for that it's going to be the 1/8 punch. No need to knock this all the way through. Halfway is good, so we could remove this. So the trigger return spring from the factory, this is what it looks like. Whereas the one from Apex looks like this. Looks pretty similar. However, we'll put the factory one in the bag as well. So I'll now proceed to assembling the Apex trigger. So first we have the trigger right here. Need to get this installed. Just need to use a punch to get it centered properly. Perfect, so this looks fine. We need to install the trigger return spring. So it's a little bit tricky to install all of this and trying to get the spring to fit while you're knocking in the hinge pin. So this little tool here is just a piece of electric wire. I use to hold the spring in place just so that the spring is right there when I'm knocking in the hinge pin. Okay. Just moving away a little bit. Okay, there we have it. So it's right there. Okay. Okay, so I'll just start fitting these on. Okay. So now I'll proceed to reinstalling my hinge pin. So given that we knocked this way through, I'll feed it the opposite way through. So I'll feed it this way through. Alright. Just have to get these lined up properly. This is spring tension, so it's a little bit difficult. Just getting it to sit right where you want it. Okay. There you have it. So we lost our little tool, so we'll have to just force the spring forward. So there we have it. We have the pin firmly in place. Our trigger works. Looks like we are partially in business. Alright. So all that's left to do is just put the slide on. Let's see what's going on here. It fires. So we'll put this to a test. However, at the moment, all ranges are closed. So what I've devised is a special way of testing this at home. So to test this trigger that it works, I'm going to be using empty shells with live primer. So these are empty shells, 3 empty shells, and they all have primer inside. So I'll put these in the chamber and I'll test for them to make sure the trigger system is working fine. It's a little bit harder when there's no bullet or no weight inside of it. Okay, we got one in. So first, I'll just pull the side of the trigger to see if it fires. Can't fire. Can't fire. That means we'll try this now. There we go. Works fine. Shell ejected. I'm trying to make sure it's not in properly to see, just to make sure the firearm is working fine. Okay, so I'll try to fire it. It's not working. We'll test one more time. Squeeze the trigger properly. Primer is firing. Primer ejected. Well, given that I had 3 made, I'll just test all 3. We can just say our trigger is working fine. That is installed properly. Only thing left is just bring it down the range, give it some testing. One final thing that I'll do, I'll use my trigger pull gauge to see what the trigger pull is and compare it to what the factory trigger pull was. So I'll go ahead and I'll check the trigger pull for this Apex Action Enhancement trigger. Then I'll compare it against the SD40VE factory trigger. Nothing in the chamber, no magazine inside. This firearm is clear. Well, 2 pound, 9.7 ounces. £2, 7.6 ounces. £1, 9.6 ounces. So on average, the Apex Action Enhancement trigger pull is about 2 pound, 3.6 ounces. That is almost half the reduction in trigger pull versus the SD40VE factory trigger. There you have it, tested and proven. As always guys, thank you for watching. Subscribe to our channel and also click the bell icon just so that you can be notified when we release new videos. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Go ahead, give us a follow. If you have any questions, comments or concern, send us a direct message or leave a comment. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. GS Creative checking out.